It was Christmas morning, and the entire house carried that warm, familiar scent of fresh pine needles from the big tree we had gone out and cut down as a family the weekend before. The colorful lights on the tree twinkled gently, sending soft red, green, and gold reflections dancing across the living room walls and the old wooden floor. Brightly wrapped presents had already been torn open, and colorful scraps of paper lay scattered everywhere like fresh snow after a storm. Joyful laughter echoed through the room. My younger brother Jake was kneeling on the carpet, excitedly ripping the tape off a large box, his eyes lighting up as he pulled out the brand new gaming console he had been begging for since the summer. He shouted with pure happiness, holding it up like a trophy. My sister Emily let out a high-pitched squeal of delight when she unwrapped the expensive designer handbag she had shown Dad pictures of in a glossy magazine for months. She hugged the bag to her chest, her face glowing with excitement. Mom sat on the armchair with a soft, content smile, carefully opening a small velvet jewelry box that Dad had just placed in her hands. Inside was a delicate necklace that made her eyes sparkle with joy as she held it up to the light. I sat quietly on the very edge of the worn-out couch, my hands clasped tightly together in my lap. I tried my best to keep my face calm and normal, like none of this was affecting me. But inside, my heart was sinking slowly and heavily, like a heavy stone dropping into deep, cold water. I watched as gift after gift left Dad's hands and found its way into everyone else's lap. The shiny bows, the perfectly folded wrapping paper, the excited thank yous and happy chatter filled the air all around me. Yet nothing came in my direction. Not a single box. Not even a small card or envelope. Not one word of acknowledgement. The pile of presents under the tree grew smaller and smaller until there was nothing left at all. For a brief moment, the room fell into an awkward silence. Jake glanced around at the empty floor and asked innocently, "Wait, is that all the gifts?" Mom gave a small, tired shrug and replied, "We tried to get what we could this year, honey. Money has been really tight lately." Dad didn't even turn his head toward me. He simply knelt down and began collecting the crumpled wrapping paper, folding each piece neatly as if the morning's excitement was already finished. In that moment, I felt completely invisible. It was as if I wasn't even sitting there in my own living room in my own home. That deep, familiar ache in my chest grew heavier and sharper, the same quiet pain I had carried silently for so many years. I was 28 years old, yet right then I felt like the small, hopeful little boy who used to sit by the tree every Christmas, secretly wishing this would finally be the year things were different. From as far back as I could remember growing up in this family, I had always been the quiet one, the reliable one, the child who never complained, never demanded too much attention, and never caused any problems. Jake was clearly the golden child, the star athlete throughout high school, always surrounded by friends, the one Dad proudly bragged about at every family gathering and neighborhood barbecue. Emily was the princess of the family, beautiful, outgoing, and charming, the one who could make Dad smile instantly with just one sweet look or request. Both of them received the spotlight, the loud praise, the special treats, and the constant attention. Me? I was simply there. I brought home good grades from school, but no one made a big deal about them. I helped with household chores without ever being asked. I took on part-time jobs during high school and college, so I wouldn't add any financial burden to the family. I stayed out of trouble and kept my head down. And somehow, because I was so low maintenance and undemanding, I became the easiest one to overlook and forget. That particular Christmas morning delivered the message louder and clearer than ever before. I didn't matter enough to deserve even one small gift. Not one thoughtful thought had gone into me. Not one moment where Dad thought, "This is for you, son." I forced a small smile when Mom briefly glanced in my direction. I said softly, "It's okay, really. I'm good." My voice sounded steady on the outside, but deep inside I was shattering into pieces. I could feel hot tears beginning to burn behind my eyes, but I pushed them back down with all the strength I had built over the years. I had become an expert at hiding my pain. Once the gift opening ended, we all moved into the kitchen for the traditional Christmas breakfast. The table was filled with stacks of fluffy pancakes, crispy bacon, fresh fruit, and warm coffee. Everyone chatted happily about their new presents. Jake was already talking about setting up his gaming console right after breakfast. Emily was busy texting photos of her new handbag to her friends, her laughter ringing out. Dad sipped his coffee with a satisfied look on his face. I sat at the far end of the table, slowly pushing the food around on my plate with my fork. I nodded politely whenever someone spoke to me, but my mind was miles away, replaying the painful scene from the living room over and over. I kept seeing the exact second the final gift was handed out, and how no one seemed to notice that I had been left with empty hands. It wasn't really about the material things themselves. It was about the deeper meaning behind the moment. It was undeniable proof that, in my own family, I was the one who could be easily skipped over. The one who didn't need to be remembered or celebrated. That familiar ache in my chest slowly transformed into something much sharper and more determined that day. It wasn't explosive anger that made me want to shout or cry in front of everyone. Instead, it was a quiet, cold, and powerful decision that began forming deep within me. I was finished being invisible. I was done pretending that the constant neglect didn't hurt me. Something inside me knew that things had to change, and I would be the one to make that change happen. Little did my family know on that Christmas morning that this painful day would become the turning point, the beginning of a much larger, more powerful story that none of them could have predicted. Let me take you even further back so you can truly understand just how deep this pattern of being overlooked had run through my entire life. Because that Christmas wasn't an isolated incident. It was simply the latest chapter in a long book of quiet neglect that had shaped who I was. When I was only 10 years old, my birthday fell just a few days after Jake's big soccer championship game. Dad organized a huge family celebration for Jake's victory. We went out for pizza, played at the arcade for hours, and everyone cheered and made a big fuss over him. When my own birthday arrived, we had a simple cake at home after dinner. Dad looked tired from work and admitted he had forgotten to buy me a present. He patted me on the head and said, "We'll do something special next weekend, buddy." But that special weekend never arrived. I smiled and told myself it was fine, that I understood. But the disappointment settled quietly in my young heart. In high school, Emily joined the cheerleading squad and became one of the most popular girls. Dad attended every single game, cheering louder than any other parent in the stands. Meanwhile, my debate team reached the state finals, and I won first place in the individual category. When I came home with the trophy, Dad simply said, "Good job, bud," without looking up from the newspaper. He missed the awards ceremony entirely because he had to drive Jake to baseball practice. That dusty trophy still sits in the back of my closet today, a silent reminder of how my achievements often went unnoticed. College brought more of the same invisible struggle. I balanced 2 part-time jobs while studying business management full-time. I graduated with honors and a solid GPA, but the family celebration that weekend centered entirely around Jake, receiving a partial athletic scholarship to play college football. Dad clapped me on the back and muttered, "Proud of you." But his proudest smiles and loudest congratulations were reserved for my brother the entire evening. His eyes rarely left Jake. Throughout all those years, I never once complained out loud. I kept smiling, kept helping around the house, and stayed quiet. But every single overlooked moment added another small cut to my heart. The wounds were invisible to everyone else, but I felt them accumulating. By the time I turned 25, I had moved back home after college because rent in the city was too expensive, and I genuinely wanted to support the family financially. I quietly paid a portion of the utility bills each month without being asked. I fixed the family car whenever it broke down. I was the one who remembered to schedule Mom's doctor appointments and drove her there. Yet whenever holidays or special occasions arrived, I remained the afterthought, the one who didn't require any extra effort or celebration. There were countless small moments that slowly built up over time. One year, Dad bought Jake a brand new pair of expensive soccer cleats during the same week. I desperately needed new work shoes for my job. When I mentioned it, he told me casually to wait until the next paycheck. Another summer, Emily received a surprise weekend trip to the beach with her friends, fully paid for by Dad as a treat. During that same period, I spent my only days off helping repaint the entire exterior of our house under the hot sun. Each of these incidents hurt in its own quiet way, but I buried the pain deep inside and kept moving forward. That Christmas when I was 28 became the final crack in the dam I had been holding together for so long. After breakfast that morning, I excused myself and went upstairs to my small childhood bedroom, the same room with the faded posters and creaky bed that I had occupied since I was a boy. I closed the door gently behind me and sat down on the edge of the bed. I stared blankly at the wall for what felt like hours. The quiet tears I had been holding back finally slipped down my cheeks without making a sound. I wasn't angry at them for enjoying their gifts. I was angry at myself for allowing this pattern to continue for nearly 3 decades. In the silence of that room, I whispered to myself with a new kind of resolve, no more. That single moment marked the true beginning of my transformation. It wasn't born from loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. It came from a calm but unbreakable decision deep in my soul. I was going to build a life so strong, so independent, and so successful that no one would ever be able to make me feel invisible again. While my family continued to see me as the quiet, average, unremarkable son who would probably never achieve much, I had actually been constructing something extraordinary in complete secrecy for several years. During late nights after my regular day job ended, and on weekends when they believed I was simply relaxing or watching television, I was teaching myself valuable skills, coding, digital marketing, sales strategies, and smart financial management. I began with a tiny online business, creating and selling custom productivity tools that I designed myself. In the beginning, it brought in only $50 a month, then a few hundred, but I never stopped. I never mentioned a word of it to anyone at home. I never bragged about my small wins. I never asked for financial help or advice. Instead, I chose to live very simply on purpose. I continued driving my old, reliable car. I wore plain, unassuming clothes. I ate modest meals at home. To them, it looked like I was barely getting by. They assumed I still needed their support and approval. They had absolutely no idea that by that painful Christmas, my small side project had quietly grown into a legitimate, thriving company. Monthly revenue was increasing rapidly. I had saved nearly every extra dollar I earned. I made wise investments. In reality, I had already achieved financial independence, but I kept it guarded like a hidden weapon, waiting for the right time. I still remember the unforgettable night I closed my very first 5-figure deal. I was sitting alone in my old car in the driveway at 2 o'clock in the morning so that no one inside the house would overhear the conversation. When the client confirmed the agreement, I gripped the steering wheel tightly and let happy tears roll down my face. It wasn't just about the money. It was the profound realization that I could achieve real success completely on my own, without anyone's help or recognition. Month after month, the business continued to expand. I quietly hired my first virtual assistant, then a second, and eventually a small team. I rented a modest office space across town that none of my family members knew existed. I often worked 80-hour weeks, yet at home I continued pretending that everything was just okay, and that I was still the same unremarkable son they had always known. Every casual comment from Dad like, "You really need to find a stable, real career, son," only added more fuel to my determination. Every time I was skipped over for a gift, a compliment, or simple attention, I channeled that quiet hurt directly into my work. The pain became my motivation. By the time the following Christmas arrived, my company had grown to a value far greater than most people earn in an entire lifetime. I had the financial numbers to prove it. I had the freedom I had dreamed about, but I still hadn't revealed any of it. I was patiently waiting for the perfect moment to finally be seen. I never wanted loud, destructive revenge. I had no interest in shouting matches or creating permanent family rifts. What I truly wanted was simple truth and clarity. I wanted my family to experience, even if only for one powerful moment, the same feeling of being overlooked and underestimated, and then to witness the person they had ignored rise up and become someone impossible to ignore. The months after that difficult Christmas passed slowly but purposefully. I poured even more effort into my work. The company expanded faster than I had ever imagined possible. And then, almost before I realized it, the next Christmas season was upon us. This time I felt completely ready. For several weeks leading up to the holiday, I carefully selected meaningful gifts for each member of my family. These weren't cheap or generic items. They were thoughtful, high-quality presents based on things they had casually mentioned wanting throughout the year, things they would never have expected to receive from me. I wrapped each one with care using beautiful paper and perfect bows. But alongside those gifts, I also prepared something far more significant. I wrote a short, honest letter, not filled with anger or bitterness but with calm truth. I also printed out the official email confirmation of the major company sale I had quietly completed just 2 weeks earlier. The amount was life-changing. It represented complete independence. I stood in front of the mirror in my room and practiced what I would say at least 100 times. My hands trembled each time, but my voice remained steady and clear. This plan was never about causing pain. It was about finally allowing myself to be truly seen for who I had become. The night before Christmas, I sat alone in my bedroom with all the beautifully wrapped gifts lined up neatly on the floor. I looked at them for a long time and whispered softly to myself, "Tomorrow, everything is going to change." Christmas dinner that year looked perfect on the surface, just like always. The dining table was beautifully set with the traditional holiday spread: roasted turkey, savory stuffing, creamy mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, and all the classic trimmings. The family chatted and laughed warmly throughout the meal. Then, once everyone had finished eating, I slowly stood up from my chair. "I have some gifts I would like to give this year," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. One by one, I handed out the presents I had prepared. Jake's eyes widened with genuine surprise when he opened the high-end watch he had admired in a store window months earlier. Emily gasped loudly and covered her mouth when she saw the luxury handbag she had circled in a catalog. Mom's eyes filled with tears of happiness as she opened the complete spa retreat package featuring all her favorite treatments. Even Dad looked genuinely surprised and pleased when he unwrapped the set of custom golf clubs he had talked about wanting for a long time. They all thanked me warmly, clearly a little confused about how I could afford such nice things. Mom said with a smile, "These are really amazing. How did you manage to get all of this?" I returned a soft smile and replied, "There's actually one more thing I want to share." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the important email. I turned the screen toward them so that everyone could clearly see the details and the numbers. It was the official confirmation of the company sale I had completed, the substantial amount that meant I no longer needed anyone's approval, anyone's gifts, or anyone's validation to feel worthy. The entire room fell into complete, heavy silence. Dad's expression changed first. The pleased smile on his face slowly faded away. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Jake sat frozen, still holding the new watch in his hands, his face showing pure shock. Emily's hand stopped in midair as she stared at the phone screen. Mom whispered in disbelief, How is any of this possible?" I looked directly at each one of them one by one and spoke in a quiet but clear voice. "Last Christmas, all of you celebrated and opened your gifts while I sat there feeling completely invisible. You laughed and enjoyed the morning as if I wasn't even part of the family. Today, I simply wanted you to see what the son you had overlooked for so many years was truly capable of achieving. I built everything on my own. While you believed I was invisible and unimportant, I was quietly becoming someone you could no longer overlook." For what felt like an eternity, no one said a single word. The silence in the room was heavier and more powerful than any argument or raised voice could ever have been. The days immediately following that Christmas became some of the most emotionally challenging yet meaningful days of my entire life. Apologies eventually started to come, though some felt hesitant. There were also excuses and long stretches of uncomfortable silence. 2 days later, Dad asked to speak with me privately in the garage. His voice cracked with emotion when he said, "I never meant to make you feel that way, son." I listened carefully without interrupting. I didn't raise my voice or lash out. Instead, I told him honestly that actions had always spoken much louder than any words, and for 28 years, his actions had clearly shown me exactly where I stood in the family. Jake reached out to me separately a few days later. He admitted that he had taken all the attention and favoritism for granted without realizing how it affected me. Emily called me one evening and cried as she said she wished she had noticed my pain much sooner and had done something about it. Mom pulled me into a tight hug and whispered through her tears that she was incredibly proud of the strong man I had become despite everything. I chose not to cut my family out of my life completely. I didn't want to destroy our relationships forever. But I did establish new, clear, and firm boundaries for the first time. The following month, I moved out of the family home and into my own quiet apartment across town. For the first time in my life, the space truly felt like it belonged to me. I began living according to my own terms, making decisions based on what I wanted and needed. The young man who had once sat feeling invisible and forgotten on that Christmas couch no longer existed. In his place stood a grown man who had finally discovered and embraced his true worth. Looking back on that painful Christmas now, I realize it wasn't the end of my story. It was actually the powerful beginning of my real freedom. Being consistently overlooked and underestimated forced me to develop strength, resilience, and self-belief far greater than I ever thought I possessed. It taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my life. Sometimes the most effective and lasting form of justice isn't loud, dramatic, or cruel. It is simply becoming the best version of yourself, the person others never believed you could be, and living a fulfilling life because of the very challenges they created. True family should support and lift you up, especially during your hardest moments. They should never make you feel small or worthless. And when they fail to do that, you have every right to rise above it on your own and create the life you deserve. I still spend time with my family on holidays. The gatherings feel noticeably different now. They look at me with new eyes. They ask genuine questions about my life and my work. They remember to include me. But even more important than their change is the change within myself. I finally remember and value who I am. If you have ever felt invisible or unimportant within your own home, if you have ever been the family member who was constantly overlooked while others received all the love, attention, and celebration, please hear this message clearly. Your worth is not defined by how others treat you. Your value is decided by you alone. Build your dreams quietly. Work steadily even when no one is watching. And when the right moment arrives, allow your success and growth to speak far louder than any words ever could. What would you do if your own family made you feel like you didn't exist on Christmas morning? Have you ever experienced this deep kind of emotional neglect or invisibility in your own life? I genuinely want to hear your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences matter. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own journey, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps these kinds of honest, emotional stories reach more people who might be feeling the same way right now. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, so you won't miss the next powerful story of quiet strength and personal triumph. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to listen to my story today. I appreciate you being here. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll explore another real journey of betrayal, growth, and justice. Take care and remember, your story is still being written.